So this is the Sony A7S III. This is one of the most revolutionary cameras ever to be created. There's a heavy online sentiment that Sony doesn't listen to its users. And I get that to an extent from a personal take standpoint, right? Everyone wants Sony's cameras to be everything all at once. It doesn't matter what camera it is, what lineup it is. They want open gate, they want internal RAW, they want cooling, they want 32-bit float audio. They want every Sony camera to be everything all in one, no matter where it sits. The alpha line, the cinema line, the intro level vlog V line, it doesn't matter. APS-C, FX3, A7S III, FX30, A7C II, they want every single release to be exactly the same. And I think Sony has a big deal to do with that expectation in regards to the heritage of the Sony current lineup, right? And so I want to talk about where we are in 2026 and the reception of Sony and what people expect out of the Sony cameras versus the reality of what we're getting and then what we're on the verge of, that I think that we're on the verge of coming up here in the next couple months or so. So I think a lot of creators, I think a lot of people with loud voices have it wrong. I don't think that Sony isn't listening to its users, its purchasers, its buyers, its content creators. I think it's a whole different conversation that needs to happen. I think that Sony has a major hand in building our thoughts that a mirrorless body should encapsulate all of the features that we want. And so let's go back to 2020, right? And let's not give all the credit to Sony because Panasonic in 2019 had just released a powerhouse video camera. But then came along the Sony A7S III, and that changed the game. And I can tell you from frustrated experience that 7 months after that, the FX3 came out. And I had just spent $4,000 on this body and the FX3 came out. And so I can say from a consumer standpoint, because nothing was sent to me, I can say that I was extremely frustrated. And as the years progressed and new Sony bodies came out, I was frustrated with the amount of updates for this camera. But that doesn't change, right, what this camera was for the industry. So not necessarily for the first time, but all in one body, you had 16-bit RAW, right, to an external monitor. You had 422 10-bit internally. You had the S-Log profile internally. You had 12,800 ISO as a second base ISO, which basically allowed this camera to see in the dark. So for the last 5 years, and even still to this day in 2026, this is still the golden standard for low light videography. Not only that, I think a lot of people when this camera released was very hard on Sony because it had been a 5-year gap from the A7S II to the A7S III, and lo and behold, here we are in 2026, and it's been a 5 to 6 year gap on this. I mean, really, this came out the end of 2020, so we're about in line. And people are very, very aggressive again on the Sony, and it's taken so long, etc. And I want to make it clear that I don't think that Sony isn't listening. And I don't think that Sony has fell behind. I think the biggest thing that people are failing to speak on is that the competition caught up. They didn't go past, they caught up to this, right? 5 years, almost 6 years ago, this was released. And in 2026, the competition caught up. Or in 2025, Panasonic released a couple cameras, the S1 II, the S1 IIR, the S1 IIe, that kind of jumped on in front of this. The Nikon and the partnership with them in Red released the Nikon ZR, and again, kind of went forward with the 6K, 4K 120 with the crop. And I have that camera back there. I love it, learning it right now, so no shade. Blackmagic, along the whole time this was out, released the Pocket 4K, the Pocket 6K, the 6K full frame, the Pixis 12K, and until recently when they released autofocus on the Pixis full-fledged release, they were kind of in the afterburners from a content creation standpoint. Now the cinema world is different. The reason that the Sony lineup is so valuable is because for the first time ever in 2020, it didn't matter if you were a wedding videographer, it didn't matter if you were a full-on documentary creator or filmmaker or a cinematographer or a rent house or a content creator or a sports videographer. It didn't matter. For the first time ever, you could recommend the same camera. And that is what revolutionized the industry. It wasn't the first camera to have 4K full frame. It wasn't the first camera with in-body image stabilization. And it wasn't the camera with, good autofocus for the first time ever. It was the first camera that did all of that. It was the first camera that allowed you to be anybody with this. So no matter what are you creating? Oh, Sony A7S III. Where are you working at? Sony A7S III. What time of day are you shooting? Sony A7S III. It was the first time that happened. So here we are in 2026, and let me cover this sensor up. Here we are in 2026, and the competition has caught up. And in 2025, people started jumping off of the wagon of Sony and saying things like Sony doesn't listen to their listeners. They keep coming out with cameras that don't matter. The FX2 was a bomb. It's dead on arrival. All of these different things. And a lot of folks fail to realize that Sony has several different lines. They have the Alpha series, they have the Cinema series, they have the V series, they have and they reuse sensors across those different lineups to cater to whatever the user is. I myself have an A7C II, a Sony A7S III. I have a Sony FX30. I think those are the three bodies that I still have. And I almost purchased an E1, decided to get the A7C II instead for various reasons. Instead of buying, FX3A, I bought the Nikon ZR. And then I'm gonna buy the next Sony camera that replaces the Sony A7S III. I still use this in 2026, and it still is in almost brand new condition. It's just a phenomenal camera. It hasn't changed how good this is in the environments that I shoot with this camera since the day it launched. It's still perfect for those scenarios. And so this didn't lose any of its value in 2025 as those new cameras came out. Low light, this is still the best. 12,800, 4K 120 with no crop. This is still the best when it comes to that, right? And so with that being said, companies came out with Open Gate. Panasonic released multiple cameras. Blackmagic did its thing with the Pixis 6K. It's one of my favorite cameras to shoot. I always want to use it. I want the 12K next. Cannot wait to get my hands on the 12K. Blackmagic, from a ecosystem standpoint, from hitting the shutter button all the way out to hitting the export button, is probably the best ecosystem that you can get. Specifically now that it's part of the L-Mount Alliance. And so there's a lot of competition out there. So this is not a Sony fanboy's perspective. This is a practical approach to the market and where Sony sits. There's not a rent house in the country that doesn't have more Sony bodies than other bodies. There's not a set in the country that doesn't use more Sony products than other sets, a major set, right? The one thing about Sony is that it's reliable. It's reliable. You've never heard of a Sony A7S III overheating. You've never heard of a Sony FX3 overheating. So when there's millions of dollars on the line and there's big budget on the line, you cannot use a system where the body may overheat, right? You want to shoot in the desert, what can you take out there? You want to shoot late at night, what can you take out there? You want to go backpacking or something like that in the savannah, what can you take out there, right? You want to go on a safari, what can you take out there? It's very limited that you can take out there and not miss an opportunity, right? And that's why Sony lives on, right? That's why it doesn't matter if the next camera comes out with Open Gate. Doesn't matter if the next camera comes out with 6K oversampling. Doesn't matter if the next camera comes out with internal RAW. At the end of the day, if there are people sitting in the boardroom writing a check, what is going to allow them to get their return on investment with the minimum amount of risk? And that's where the Sony lineup sits. And that's why it may feel like they don't listen to their content creators and they don't listen to their folks that are out in small gigs, and they don't listen to their folks that are in gyms that need open gate, and they don't listen to the ones or twosies that are, creating content vertically and horizontally at the exact same time. It's because they're listening to the folks that are writing the paychecks. Believe it or like it, good, bad, or indifferent, they're listening to the folks that are writing the paychecks. And so that's why you can take an FX3 out and film a movie called The Creator that is one of the largest, budgets, in the world at the time. And you can do it with a $4,000 camera, not a $20,000 camera, not a $50,000 camera, not an IMAX camera, but the equivalent of this camera. You can take this camera out there and make a Hollywood major video because it's reliable. And it doesn't matter what set you need to shoot on, you can shoot with this, right? And no, it's not open gate. And no, it doesn't have internal RAW. And no, it's not 14-bit internal. No, it doesn't have RE codecs. No, it doesn't have Red RAW. It doesn't have all of those things. But it has exactly what the Hollywood execs needed in order to write the paycheck for a guy to go out into the field and create a Hollywood movie in 2025, 5 years after its release. So where does that take us in 2026? Where are we at now? In 2025, the frustration came from Sony's reputation that stemmed from the A7 III, the A7S III, all of A7S II, blah, 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 the lineup, right? All of the lineup. Everybody expected the next camera to have the same leap as the A7S III. They wanted the FX30 to be as groundbreaking as the FX3 and A7S III, and it kind of actually is, or was at the time it released. They wanted the FX2 to be as groundbreaking as the FX3, and honestly, matching its color with the Venice and giving you all the features, it actually is for the right client. Maybe not if you're, a certain type of buyer, right? But it actually did break ground for what you needed in a camera that is pocketable, for lack of better terms, that matches the color of a Venice, where you can go shoot over here in the desert and then shoot the Venice on set and all those different things, and everything matched perfectly. It did break ground for that. Just didn't give you the leap that you wanted. And so this is kind of where everybody is in 2026. But the tables are starting to turn as the rumors start to come out for the FX5 and what people thought the FX3 II was going to be. People are starting to jump back on the bandwagon again because they're starting to realize that Sony didn't go 5 years without listening to its users. Sony just went through their regular deployment cycle. They went through their regular development cycle. They took another 5 years to come up with what they thought was applicable in the market to, take their next step in the journey. People don't have this impatience with other brands, right? Apple comes out with the exact same phone every single year. Incremental updates, but people act like it's groundbreaking every single year because they add a little bit more software. Those are the big changes in the Apple ecosystem. It's the reliability and it's the software that makes those phones better every single year. It's not always recognizable by the user. You can't tell the difference as a user from the A15 to the A17 Bionic chip. If you can, you probably work for Apple. And if you can't, you're normal, right? And so you can't really tell the difference. But if they release their Fold, is this the first time that Apple's been innovative since Steve Jobs? Not really, because Samsung already has the Fold. So why do you give Apple the pass, but you don't give Sony the pass, right? And so that's kind of where I've been over the last year and a half, listening to people rant and rave about Sony not doing something or Sony not being evolutionary and Sony not, etc. And they say, well, Sony is a company of billions of dollars and billions of employees. That means they have billions of reasons not to rush into the next decision. That means they have a lot of money on the line every time they produce and release something. That means that they're not just going to respond to rants and anger, and people being upset, etc., because they are still selling cameras. Nothing has changed. Their cameras are still reliable. They're still on movie sets. They're still in rent houses. They're still, I think in 2024, the Sony A7S III was number 3, from a rental standpoint across the country. Number 3. And it wasn't the best camera, but it still was number 3. So that's very interesting, to end this video on. I'm excited for 2026 and what Sony's going to release. Super anxious to see what that FX5 is going to be and what features it's going to have. I'm also super interested to see what people's reactions are going to be and how people are going to flip overnight, and all of a sudden Sony is the best thing since sliced bread again. And this comes from somebody that I have shot Sony consistently for the last 5 years. I've also shot Blackmagic, love my Fuji X-T3, loving my Nikon ZR. Shot the S9 recently and can't wait to get it back in my hands from Adorama. Gonna shoot it some more. Really interested to see what Panasonic comes out with this year. But at the end of the day, Sony is the gold standard, even though they may not sell more than Canon. They are the reliable, steady Eddie, the turtle that keeps winning the race, even though rabbits kind of jump in front and the turtle keeps catching up at the end. So I don't know, you let me know your thoughts. This is kind of like, I got a lot more. I just kind of jumped around. I was going to go through a whole history lesson and who released what, when they released it. Maybe I'll put an article in the link below, but I don't know. I'm anxious to hear everybody's thoughts. But as always, if you're new to the channel, enjoy today's conversation, jump in, share your thoughts below. I won't get mad, promise. Join the Cosey Coalition. But as always, stay cozy in that crazy world, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.